I'm Melissa Shanahan, and this is the Velocity Work Podcast, episode number 59. This podcast is for attorneys who are running their own firms. We explore tactics, tools, and stories related to pushing past simply lawyering well and into building a successful firm. Working in your firm and working on your business are two very different things. This podcast focuses on the latter. Hey everyone, welcome to this week's episode. I am so glad you're here. You're in for a special treat because Joey Vitale is back on the podcast. We have had one episode together on the Velocity Work podcast early in 2020, and that was a hit. People loved that episode, and so he is back. And I'm pumped that he's back because here at Velocity Work, we do these things called sprints, these 30-day sprints. And Joey has taken part in every single sprint I've done, even when it was like super beta, he was in it. And he gives his all in these sprints. And essentially they're 30 days to really make some headway on the business, on the business work. So you basically claim a result you're going to create, and then there's daily accountability, and there's support with sort of these mini groups of attorneys. And it's so much more than just that, but that's what these sprints are. And so these participants, they all get to know one another. And people in the September sprint have been really curious about Joey's. He's talked a little bit about his process for hiring an overseas VA. And there was enough interest where it was like, okay, we should have something, like it'd be really cool to share your knowledge with the participants. And so what we nailed down was he's going to lead a bonus workshop for October sprinters, which if you aren't in it, there's still 6 spots left right now. So you can get in it. And the October sprint starts on October 1st. He's going to do a workshop on October 9th for those participants. And I am pumped about this because it is basically him opening up like behind the curtain. And when I say that, I really mean it. We walked through last week what he's thinking, what he could share and how it might help. And I was blown away. I mean, the generosity of this dude to be giving this to the participants is so cool. And he's doing it just literally out of the kindness of his heart. Like he just wants to be helpful to fellow owner attorneys. I think that's so incredible. So the thing is, what I got to see was there is an outline he's going to give for his whole process. He's going to give that away to participants. And then behind the curtain, like for real, he digs into the outline. So he walks you through, like he's going to share a screen with the participants and walk you through like, okay, this is the page I have set up as a test for the applicants. These are the forms that I've created for the applicants to fill out. And it's really a very automated process at this point that helps him narrow down from sometimes 2,000 applicants when he's posting online down to about 2% of that, which, he gave the example of about 40 people that he's even remotely interested in going back to look more into those candidates. And it's just dialed in. And I'm excited for you guys to hear about this. So let's just say, for whatever reason, the October sprint just doesn't feel like something you want to do, you're still going to get a ton out of this podcast. And really the whole perk or the point of the workshop is that when you come to that, he'll actually be able to screen share and show you everything. And we'll also, I'm going to create a worksheet to make sure that you're walking away with something really tangible, like a one-sheeter on like, okay, these are my next steps. No matter where you are, if you know nothing about how to hire an overseas VA, or if you already have one, for example, I think you're going to take away some really cool next steps for yourself, no matter where you are in that journey. So that really inspired this episode. And I asked him, okay, that's great. We're going to do this. Would you be willing to come on the podcast and share this on the podcast? And for people who want to take it deeper, then they can participate more fully in October. And he was like, sure. So that's why we're doing the podcast. So I hope you find some value out of this. If you do want to join the October sprint, if that's interesting to you, go to velocitywork.com/mastery. At that URL, you will find all the details for the upcoming sprint. And I'm super excited to hit the ground running with those of you who are enrolled. Here is a little bit about Joey. Joey is not only one of the most wonderful, kind human beings that I've had the pleasure of working with, but he is also the owner of IndyLaw.com. That firm has grown significantly in the last couple of years. And he's also doing some work at the URL joeycvitale.com. You can learn more there about, and that's more his educational coaching side of things. So that's where you can find him. He lives in Chicago. He is a young, hip attorney. He's not that much younger than me, but he just feels so like young at heart. And doing really cool things, always pushing the edge with technology and finding new and great ways to help people. So I'm just so excited he's here on the podcast. Without further ado, here is Joey Vitale on hiring overseas VAs. Enjoy. Welcome back, Joey Vitale.
I'm always excited to be here. But I'm really excited for this episode.
I know, this is going to be great. So we are here to talk about hiring, and really more specifically, hiring for an overseas virtual assistant. And the reason I thought this podcast would be useful is, well, number one, this podcast idea came because you are going to host a workshop for the October sprinters. And so everybody, if you don't know what that's about, you can go to the show notes. But basically there are people who participate in these 30-day sprints, and we do a workshop every month. But this has been something that people are really fascinated by. Joey's in the sprint. And so Joey kind of has a process for hiring VAs, especially overseas. And you have a process for hiring in the States as well. Mm-hmm. But that's not what we're going to focus on today. But yeah. You're good at this. Like, you've nailed it down. There's an art to it, and you've really gotten great at it so that you get great candidates through the door. And so I would love to have you share with people today on the podcast a little bit about that. And for those of you who want, Joey's going to give his processes and all of that in the workshop in October. You got to join the sprint, but that sort of a bonus workshop we're adding is deep diving on this. So, okay, look, can I just ask you a couple questions to start?
Absolutely, yeah.
You mentioned that the reason, like, the thing to talk to attorneys about first would be this idea of trust. There's a lot of people that don't trust hiring a VA overseas, or I don't know. So can we talk about trust and get that out of the way so then we can kind of get to the nuts and bolts?
Yeah. So I've had VAs since I started my business. And really that's just, the mentors and coaches that I worked with at the time had great resources that I started with. And it was super easy at the time for me to find someone overseas for just like 5 hours a month when I started. Mm-hmm. And so that's something that I've been leaning on time and time again. And this year, more attorneys have been reaching out to me saying, "Hey, Joey, like, I know that you've done this before." And at this point, I have like what we call our A to Z hiring process document. And so lawyers were asking me to just hop on like free Zoom calls, and I walked them completely through it all. And I was hoping and expecting that by the end of the call, they would just be like, "This is great. This answers all of my questions. Now I can just take this and put a job posting out there and hire somebody." And more often than not, when the call was about to end and I kind of did a little check-in, they were like, "This is all great. But now I'm realizing that I still had this fear of moving forward with this. And even though I know at least that I have an example of steps that I can take, the idea of trusting somebody else is just something that I don't feel ready yet."
So what do you have to say to that? I mean, I could see where that fear would be real. So what do you have to say to help people overcome it or decide if they should overcome it for themselves?
Yeah. So when talking with attorneys, especially, I really want to be mindful of the fact that I know where they're coming from as people, but also like as attorneys.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that in law school, in our law firms, when working with our clients, we're trained to think about worst case scenarios.
Mm-hmm.
And for a lot of us, because of our practice areas, we have examples we can point to of, well, it didn't work for this person, or this person's having this big issue because of it. And I get that. But the nice thing about bringing on help at such an admin level is you don't need to trust them a whole lot to do very administrative level things.
Mm-hmm.
And what's been now, I think we have 6 or 7 different virtual assistants, and one of them, we call him our lead VA. He's really kind of like the integrator or business manager for their entire company. That's the assistant to our kind of daytime one. Mm-hmm. And he manages all the other VAs. And he now got there because we, over the past couple of months and maybe a year now, we've just really given him more and more confidential information and seen what he can do. And we now have built that level of trust. But also, it's important to have a job posting that gets enough eyes, where enough people go through the process, so that you do feel like you're talking to enough people that you can almost get that gut instinct of, can I trust this person? Do they really align with our values? Mm-hmm. And you have a really good pool of people. And every time I do a job posting, I usually see that like it gets like 2,000 views. So I know that there are a lot of eyes on it, which makes the final selection process a lot easier.
That's, well, but I think some people could think, well, that might make it harder because there's so many eyes on it. But
it could be.
Go ahead.
We have certain things that we do now in the application process so that we filter it down. We've got a couple of different rounds that are pretty automated at this point. Mm-hmm. And so by the time it gets to that same lead virtual assistant, there's about 40 final candidates, and it's on him to choose, based on everything that we've received so far, which of those like top 5 people do we want to have an interview with first. The other thing I'll say on this note of trust is that usually it's also a mirror. And not only do they have trust with issues with other people, but they don't really trust that if they bring somebody on, that they will consistently have work for them, or that the business will have enough money coming in consistently for them to pay even a very part-time virtual assistant. Mm-hmm. And yeah, there's a lot of self-trust that you have to build when you start bringing on a team.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. So I guess before we dig into more your process and all that, what would be, I mean, if you could just have a billboard just for attorneys who are considering hiring a VA or could be in a good position to hire a VA overseas, what would be, when it comes to trust, what would your billboard say to them?
Trust is given, not earned.
Trust is given, not earned. Yeah.
Like when you're smart about it and you're not giving everybody your social security number or access to all of your passwords, what's the worst that could happen, really, when you're giving people these very admin level tasks? And what's the best that could happen if it turns out that you build this level of trust? No, the other thing is, and I want to be real here, I went through a pretty traumatic experience of my own. And so I had a series of panic attacks, wound up in the hospital for a couple of weeks. And I went through an experience where I had a team that I hadn't really totally solidified, like pure trust across the board. And not because of that experience, I realized that the business couldn't function at the time if I didn't trust their ability to just run things without me, update the clients, have access to my social security number in some cases. Like somebody on the team needed to have that information.
Mm-hmm.
And I learned that when I say trust is given, not earned, when you just give that trust freely, it means a lot to the people who are receiving it. Mm. And I think now, because of that experience that I had to go through, I have certain team members who not only can I trust fully now, but they are kind of champions and cheerleaders of culturally what it means to trust radically across the team. Mm-hmm. That is just setting a really good example for everybody.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, definitely, you're so right. It really is a cultural thing. Yeah. Trust is. But so, okay, one more, not to just get into the weeds too much, but when you say trust is given, not earned, and you just said, when I give trust freely, but at first, do you not give trust freely? You sort of incrementally trust more and more and more? Or no, I don't know. I'm just thinking, because I'm thinking there's people probably listening to this and they're like, that almost feels like 0 to 60 on a trust thing, like to give trust freely.
Yeah. Well, I'll steal Melissa-ism of trust but verify.
Okay. And also, I shouldn't take credit for that. I don't.
Yeah, I know that's a thing. I heard it from Melissa and then realized that like she's not the source of that phrase.
Right. No.
I was talking to my wife and I was like, have you ever heard trust but verify? She's like, yeah.
Exactly.
But I think that in the beginning, like I can trust everybody extremely with the information that I give them, and not all of it is super confidential. And in the beginning, we are doing a lot of verifying.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
And it's that verifying that can become earned over time, and less check-ins, us feeling like we know that they can hit their deadlines. It starts to become, on the one hand, people on your team start to get a sense of what the roadblocks are to them getting their work done, and they start to communicate that the more clear they are. Mm-hmm. But also there's a sense of like, okay, now I'm good here. Is there some ability for me to rise up in the accountability chart and manage somebody else? And something that I don't think gets talked a lot about when it comes to overseas virtual assistants is that, and I don't mean this in like a mean way, but like they have brains too. And I think sometimes people, when they think of overseas Philippines VAs, we have this idea in our mind of just very, very low admin level tasks. And I'm a huge proponent of starting everybody on the team at like a low level. But if they show themselves and prove themselves to be capable of doing more, we have overseas VAs who are climbing our accountability chart. And they are taking on more managing and supervising roles. And I think a lot of people don't realize that there's that type of a potential that you can have even with overseas workers.
So good. That's such a good point. I didn't even think about that, but I know that that's a thing. Like in talking to people, it's, and I don't even necessarily, I don't think people mean to judge in that way, but it's it's just an unknown. You have no idea what their education is like over there. You have no, like wherever there is, right?
Right.
So like it can, because it's just this unknown variable, people don't, it almost feels like they could be wasting their time. And so they don't dip their toe. And so that's a really good point I feel like you made, is just that these are educated people who are doing really good work that is allowing your business to grow and to scale, and they are a part of the culture. And so, okay, a couple questions. This leads to another question. For you and the way that you're building things, generally speaking, most of the time, they are a part of the culture. Like no one is brought into your organization without understanding the culture and the mission and like what we're doing here, right?
Right.
And how we operate. Do you think that has to be that way, or can you really have more of a transactional relationship to an overseas VA?
I think you can.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think there's any one right way to do this, but it came up recently in a big team meeting that we had that are the core values that we have. We recently kind of changed some terminology. It doesn't seem like the culture is shifting, but we're just kind of picking what we think are some smarter, more effective words.
Mm-hmm.
And someone basically made a point that it sounded like our values were losing their heart.
Mm-hmm.
There were certain, like we used to have kindness as a value,
Mm-hmm.
and like diversity and inclusion as values. And we decided to shift away from naming those specifically. And when we talked about it, we were like, you know what? It doesn't seem really helpful for us right now to pick values that we don't feel like if you're a good cultural fit, you have to strive for. Like you don't have to strive for kindness or diversity and ethics. And so we picked certain values that require more muscle on our end and more work. And it's not just something that we believe in, but it's something that like we're always seeing room for improvement in.
Yeah.
And when it is nice now to like, again, kindness isn't one of our core values, but everybody on our team has this like level of kindness to them, where if they didn't, they wouldn't be a good fit for the team culturally.
Right.
I don't know how long they'd stay.
Yeah.
And I don't think the rest of the team would enjoy working with them as much.
Yeah. That's interesting to hear. I love the idea that I think Chris Nicolason shared a resource. I don't remember who it was, but shared a resource that talked about core values shouldn't be something you just believe. It's something that you do. It's like action that you take. It's how you operate, not just something you believe in.
Yeah.
Man, I'm trying to think of where I heard that. I don't remember exactly, but so I wish I could give credit to that. But I really love the idea of that. It's an interesting distinction. And so I guess if you're going to hire a VA, an overseas VA, or anybody for that matter, overseas VA, US VA, or a contractor of any sort, or an employee of any sort, sort of sharing with them what you're about.
Yeah.
Can't hurt, I guess is what I'm hearing you say. Like it's a good way to go because it kind of sets the tone.
It is. And again, there's such an abundance of people who can help you who are good fits, where going back to, there can be so many people out there. Looking for good culture fits is the main thing that we do to try and get that list down from, like the 2000 to the 40. And when all it takes is a couple questions about here are our values, which one do you like, and give us an example of what it means to you.
Yeah.
And people who don't really resonate with that question just won't fill out the form.
Right. That's so good. Okay. Well, so on that note, kind of getting more into the nuts and bolts of it, you mentioned there's one place that you guys go at this point. You use one URL to go find your VAs. What is that?
It's called onlinejobs.ph.
Okay, cool. And so that's where you go. And when you post there, that's where you're talking about, you have a lot of eyeballs on your post, like 2,000 people, even maybe.
Yeah.
So we talked last week and you walked me through your process. Like you guys have built out a process that's fully documented about how to go, like how to post all the way, post a job all the way down to selecting the hire.
Yeah.
And it is pretty fantastic. Like for all of you listening, and like there is an outline that he has for the whole process, but then you can go deeper into the outline. And so there are sort of not tests, but there are exercises that you have the people go through. And if they do that and based on their responses, then you'll engage further with them. And so they sort of self-select in terms of like who is going to be the right fit based on how detail oriented they are and their personality. And you have them take an assessment of some sort for personality. And so anyway, this whole thing is documented. I'm kind of giving an overview and then I want to ask you questions about it, but I'm just trying to lay the land for people. This whole thing is documented from top to bottom, linked with like, when these people fill out forms in this SOP or this document he has created that walks through the process, there's links to the spreadsheets with all of their answers. And then they sort them by how they answered. And so, and then that's how they know to go to the next round. And his team most of it's automated, but his team can really run this whole thing until Joey doesn't have to get involved until the very end. And you guys have been finding killer candidates through this process. So, I mean, I don't know if you want to maybe just give a high level view of the steps.
Yeah.
And then
absolutely.
And I know, I mean, we try, Joey and I could talk for hours. So I try to keep this to where you guys can listen to this in a reasonable amount of time. But also I do think it's important to walk through the steps. We're not going to like withhold something on purpose, but clearly we can dive more into this in the workshop. And so I'm telling you guys, like, the fee to join the sprint, this is worth it. The bonus workshop, in my opinion. So anyway, tell them your steps.
Yeah. Well, again, we talked about trust in the beginning and how I had calls after I showed people this list. I do think that there's the value in a document like this and where you can just plug and play. I think it's also valuable as a exercise that bubbles up additional concerns more effectively. Sometimes we see something that we want and we get so focused on what we think is a way to get there that we don't think about all the way like how to get to the finish line. And we just think that, because this one way we haven't figured out yet, like we'll figure out how to implement this one strategy to get to the finish line. And then when that strategy is there or presented to you, you realize it doesn't take you all the way there. And so I just want to highlight that I love that we're creating an opportunity for people to have a conversation after they see something like this. Because I think that's really where the value is. So
conversation, and you're so generous with what you're willing to show them. I mean, you're like, there's certain like, you'll have to change some things or pull some things out, right? But like to see this, I think the best way for us to start learning is to see a model, and whether that's a human and how they're doing something, or whether that's a process, and then not just taking that as your own blueprint, but just being inspired by like, that's one way to structure this. It gives you a starting place, and you're generous enough to be able to provide a bit of a model for people, and for them to see the flow and like how things link together. And that's awesome. So thank you. I mean, that doesn't surprise me. You're one of the most generous people I know. But okay, so step one is what? When someone sees your posting, then what?
Yeah. So step one actually is go on onlinejobs.ph. Just to clarify, it's a free website. It's free software, but the free version doesn't allow you to have hyperlinks.
Oh.
So we invest in the paid version whenever we're doing a job posting, so that we can have two links at the bottom. One is a link to a really quick Myers-Briggs personality quiz. And then the other link is to a form on our end. We do that because it's easier for us to manage responses that come in through this form that get taken to a spreadsheet versus all of the, like our inbox inside onlinejobs.ph being filled up, and then us having to respond to one-to-one with all of these different applications.
Yeah.
So this, and again, we pay Online Jobs for this.
How much is that?
I want to say it's maybe $60 or $70 a month.
Okay.
Which you can just pay for the month that you're doing this and then go back to free.
Okay.
And so that allows us to continue to interact with people outside of the platform. And we have it set up so that two things happen when the form is completed. Number one, their responses get saved into a spreadsheet that my team has access to. Also, they automatically get a follow-up email right when they hit send that says, congrats, you've already made it to the second round. We now have a challenge for you because we know that we're going to expect a lot of candidates here. And so it's a link to a job challenge that we have put together, which is essentially take a look at this mock-up of a landing page that we've created for our business and take a screenshot of it, annotate it, and let us know what problems you see on the page, specifically like what typos you see.
This is my favorite part of the whole process.
Yeah.
Because so if you can all picture, like he has a landing page set up and he'll share it, and I got to see it last week, but it was awesome. Some were really obvious typos, but then he had some that were super sneaky. And, that was, it's then when, he's saying like, I want you to take a screenshot and annotate, but then their responses ended up in a spreadsheet. Because it was yes. Oh, your team fills that out.
So no. So we then say, when the email sends them to a Google Doc or something that says, here's the challenge. When you're ready to send us, your assignment for the challenge, it's a second form. So it's a second form that has a second spreadsheet on our end that we see where it's their information again, and they upload their annotated screenshot.
Okay.
And my team is now trained to know what those sneaky mistakes are. So we just mark the ones that saw all of the errors, or really the ones that just saw the sneaky errors. And if you go from the job posting down to that's where we see that dip in thousands of people who saw the job posting, and 40-ish that maybe got it all the way through and found all the answers. And so what we then do is we see who those 40 are. And then really for the first time, we start to look back in the history of the application process for those 40 applicants and say, okay, based on what all of these people said from their first form responses up until now, which ones really seem like they would be good fits for us.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So that was my favorite part. When I saw the like screwy landing page that people have to like pick out the errors, and there was one really sneaky one. And then I saw the spreadsheet where it was like, did they catch the sneaky error? And of all the no's, but there were some yeses. And it was like, okay, well, that's your peeps. Those are who you're going to start to dig into.
Yep.
And it was just a really cool way to, and also I think there's something cool. I don't know if this makes me a granny with tech, but I think it's cool too that you had them take a screenshot and annotate it. Not everybody knows. Did you mean like annotate on the screenshot? Yeah.
Yes.
Like draw or something.
And we give you instructions on, here's how to take a full page screenshot and here's how to annotate it.
Oh, that's nice. So, I didn't know you do that. Okay. So they may not have known how to do that prior, but it doesn't mean that they get weeded out because of that.
Right.
Okay, cool. Okay. So then let's say the yeses. So then you start digging back into all the yeses. It's like, okay, these people are worth us looking into. So you look back at the answers that they've already been giving you this whole way through the journey. And then how do you narrow it down further?
Yeah. So if it feels like it's still hard for us to find like 5 people, then someone on our team will BCC email the list and say, we're about ready to do our final interviews. Before we do that, though, there's just like one more question that we have. And it's a certain type of a question that is asking for even more and kind of gets into more of what it is that we're looking for, because at this point, we're all pretty confident that all these people can probably do the job well. And at this point, we are really looking for people who like them doing the work that we want them to do fits really well with what they want to do. Yeah. And so not only do we want them, but like they would want to work with us.
That's kind of interesting too. We didn't necessarily say that before, but in your posting, you don't give a lot of details about the job itself, right?
No, and we've started to get some flack for that with people who we don't really see as good fits, anyways. But part of it, like we actually never in the entire application process ask for resumes.
Mm-hmm.
I'm way less interested in their background and their skill set than them showing up as like human beings during the application process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That know how to follow instructions.
Cool. I mean, so how general do you stay in your post?
It's usually, in terms of our post, our goal really is to be like a job posting that stands out.
Yeah.
And because of my brand, that means more kind of funny and goofy and casual.
Mm-hmm.
We just really want to catch their eyes. And so our job posting is, I think that at this point, there's like one sentence that we tweak in terms of like, we're looking for this type of a person with this type of a role. The rest is the exact same for every single posting.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, cool. Okay, so then you maybe BCC all of them on the same email, and then there's another form, or they just respond?
At that point, they just respond.
Okay.
The person on our team who manages those just kind of adds what they say into the spreadsheets that we already have.
Okay.
And then it took a while for me to get to this process.
Yeah.
And it was just a couple of rounds ago that I took myself out of the interview process. I was no longer conducting the interviews. I think we're a couple of hires away from my US teammate who's conducting the interviews, training someone on our VA team to conduct the interviews.
Is every VA you have from the Philippines?
Every overseas VA that we have is from the Philippines.
Okay. But you do have a couple of VAs from the US as well.
Yes.
Okay.
I have to say, there are, here in the United States, people who work virtually, when they hear virtual assistant, they think super admin level work involved. And so when you hire a US virtual assistant, that for some people that means something, like that means like low level work. So you could be a virtual assistant, or a step higher would be a project manager, or a step higher would be an online business manager. And then above that could be like an integrator or a CEO. And those can all be virtual positions that assist you. But the term virtual assistant really has come to mean something more admin level here in the US, where overseas, I think it still means that just by default. But it has been amazing to promote and elevate the overseas VAs on our team.
Okay, cool. Okay.
Does that clarify your question? Was that helpful?
I kind of got lost in what you said. I don't remember exactly what I asked you.
Okay. You asked if
if every
assistants
VA
in the US, if every VA that I have is overseas. And so I do have virtual assistant help here in the US.
Okay.
I don't refer to any of them as virtual assistants inside the company.
So they're not
They all
really,
have
they're just
titles.
virtual team members.
Yeah.
But they're not virtual assistants.
It depends on how you define that term. And that's why I kind of hesitate to talk about virtual assistants in the US, because to some audiences it means something. So
kind of what you're saying is virtual assistants, when people think of virtual assistants, they tend to think of just very admin work.
Yeah.
That you don't have any of that in the US. You do have that at the Philippines, but actually some of those people in the Philippines are moving up the ranks, and they're becoming less and less of the admin.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, cool. That's great. Okay. The other thing I want to ask about, or I want you to tell people about, is just like give an example, because I thought it was so cool. there's one questionnaire, there's one form, one of the forms that you mentioned where they answer some questions. And one of the questions I loved that you showed me. Would you share that, what that question is?
I don't know if I remember which question it was.
It was like, 1 year from now.
Oh, yeah. So this is an interview. This is a question that we asked during our interview.
Oh, during the actual interview.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's, imagine a year from now, it's a Friday, you're closing out and you're just feeling like deciding to work with us was the best professional decision of your career so far. And like, you really feel that. What would have to be true for you to feel that way?
That's so good, Joey Vitale. That is so good. Yeah. I bet you get some really cool responses or just different kinds of responses.
Yeah. I've learned that you can Google like good interview questions, and so many of them are meant to see if someone's a good fit for you. And because of our hiring process now, we're no longer trying to figure out if they're a good fit with us by the time they get to the interview. We already believe that they would be good with us. So I'm not interested in asking trick questions or getting them, seeing if they can think on their feet or anything like that. And I just want to get a sense transparently if we'd be a good fit together. And so I guess you can call it a disarming question, but I'm trying to ask things that get them out of their head so they're less focused on giving me what they think the right answer is, and we can just have a conversation.
Also, what a gift to hear people's responses. There's so much learning in that for you as the owner. Yeah. I mean, like, what do people really care about? And I think it forces you to think about what can you provide as a part of the culture, like what matters to people? Because sometimes it isn't more money. And, there's other things, there's values, there's real values. And so I feel like their values sort of come out with that question, that whatever it is that makes them so glad that they are working for you. Yeah. That is gold as an owner. I think that's gold. You can really run with that and honor your team with their answers, like that could be the goal. That's really cool. So that's just an example, people, of one of the questions. I just thought that was awesome. There were a few on there though. I was like, ooh, what's that one? Ooh, it's that one. So yeah. So then you actually have the interviews. Now you're taken out of that process, but you were until recently a part of that process. And that's like an example of one of the questions that happens in the interview. And then you make the offer, I guess, to the candidate that you think is the best. Yeah. And I saw, go ahead.
I will say, I am really grateful for having gone through the experience of doing those interviews myself. Going back to that topic of trust, I think it became a lot easier for me to quickly trust the team when I hopped on a Zoom call with all of them. And from day one, I saw what their house looked like, and the fact that they were investing in some pretty high quality internet to make this work.
Yeah.
And that they, some have kids that they're, trying to do whatever they can to support. Yeah. And you realize that it's in their best interest to be as good of a team member for you as they can be. And if that's true, then what is there that you shouldn't trust them with in terms of like them being a Disney villain or like trying to sabotage your business or whatever it is?
Yeah.
And it really humanized the experience of this isn't just some cog in this wheel that isn't me, and what if they do it wrong?
Right. Yeah. And that makes a lot of sense. That's so good. I think sometimes people look at owners, like you're an example of one of the owners. I think people will look at and you talk about how great your team is. And when they look at you and they're like, well, yeah, but that's because it's Joey. Like, and so there is some truth to that. Like I think you and there's other owners that just kind of have this special thing, this light about them. But that isn't just it. It can't stop there, because there's a lot of owners that I've met and I've worked for in the past. There's a lot of owners that they have this light about them, but they don't put processes into place, and they're disorganized and it's chaos, and you can't rely on them, like their word. Like they say they're going to get something done and they don't, and you're always waiting on them. And like so it's almost like, for any of you out there, like, well, yeah, but Joey has such a good team because he's Joey. Yes, but also you've done a ton of hard work in putting things into place and creating a sense of organization inside of your firm, and always being as mindful as possible to infuse culture. But like, it's not just, and I think maybe I probably do this to certain people too. It's not just that you are this like beacon of light, and so that's why you have this good team. It isn't. Like when you think about the process you built, when I saw that outline and how detailed it is and how it really opens up and there's links to everything you would need, and for that, like your team has at their fingertips a way to get in the right spot of the hiring process that is, it's not all over the place. It's not in a doc here and a doc there. It's all organized and pulled together. And that helps your team run efficiently, and it helps your team be able to abide by core values, and it helps your team to, it provides less stress through their journey. Like, I just think there's a lot that you, this hiring process that you created, we're talking specifically about the one for overseas VAs today, is just an example, a small, tiny example of the work you do behind the scenes. And, good job. I mean, I know there's a lot of people listening to this that work on stuff like that, but I hope that what you're talking about right now can serve as a source of inspiration for people who maybe haven't gotten their ducks in a row yet for this part of their business, or have kind of been holding themselves back for hiring a VA overseas, even though you're a testament, and there's many people out there that will say it's one of the best things they've done for their business. If you do it right, and if you really do it thoughtfully, it's one of the best things you can do. And it's not a recipe for everyone, but it's something to look at,
No, and it's a process that is inherently valuable to develop in-house. And every once in a while, someone will reach out to me and be like, "Hey, Joey, I'm looking for a VA. Can you help me? Or do you know anybody on your team who might need work?" And my team is getting busier and busier. So more often I'm responding by saying, like, everyone on my team is at capacity, but I'm happy to grab a call with you and show you my process. And there's some sense of like, Joey's just keeping his good workers. But really, I do think that I'm doing a disservice to my business owner colleagues by just introducing them to a VA that I got to know.
Yeah, definitely. 100%. I agree with that. Because then, they're screwed next time they have to do this on their own. Yeah.
One of my favorite tips to tell business owners when it comes to this hiring is, I challenge you to put a job posting out there knowing that you're not going to hire anybody. Like, just go through that experience of collecting candidates, having those questions, and recording what happens so that you have a process for next time.
Yeah.
And don't feel a pressure to bring anybody on if you don't feel like you got good candidates. We've had that happen before, where we did a round and we got to the finalists, and it didn't seem like we had enough. And so we decided to just do it all over again.
Cool.
And there was a different pool of people that saw it. So
yeah, that's really good. Well, cool. Thanks so much for being on here and sharing this stuff. I am trying to think if I'm leaving any questions out that I wanted to ask. Is there anything that you wanted to say that you feels important for this process?
One question that I get asked a lot when it's overseas is, what do you do about any type of language barrier? And I have on the one hand, I found that, my team's English is pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
And that hasn't really become an issue, except for a couple of things. Like one is we don't have any of the overseas VAs do any like copywriting for us, like coming up with language. And also we've learned to be a little bit more clear in our team language across the board, so that on the one hand, our team isn't saying things that, sometimes there's a lot that's said in exclamation points and emojis that might get lost in translation. But also, we've learned that it's very common for people who aren't as super conversational and fluent with the language as you to write in a more cold and clear way. Or not even cold, but just more kind of matter-of-factly. And my team had to be trained to not overthink those types of statements and language, because there was no passive aggressiveness intended.
Yeah.
And you just have to expect that over time.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's a really good point. I know it's been a few days since we talked about it, but would you mind sharing kind of the things that you're going to be sharing in the workshop that we're hosting next month?
So I'm an open book. So if people have questions or whatever, I'm happy to show whatever. But I am going to be going through this entire process with everybody, answering
like
whatever
screen
questions.
Share.
Yeah.
I'll
also tell you guys about some of the changes that we recently made, just because if you can kind of stand on my shoulders with some things that I've learned recently, I'm happy to. And a big part of these new changes that we're making is we really do want to make sure that in our application process, we are standing for inclusion and equity. And so we're going to be adding some more language to our postings inside of our forms and things like that to make sure that people who fit that feel encouraged to apply. And regardless, people know that that's a culture that they're going to have to see coming.
Wow, that's really great. You are an open book, and I know you well enough to know you'll just share whatever people are asking about. But the one thing that I just thought was so handy that you agreed to actually give out, we can give a copy of, is the outline of your flow, your process. And it's like a high level outline, but it's a detailed high level outline.
Yeah.
And I asked you if you thought we could come up with some prompting questions for the attorneys who are going to participate in this workshop so that they can kind of think for themselves, how might they do this section? What's important to them? All of that. Our goal, you guys, for those of you listening, any workshop that we do inside of a sprint is meant to, you should be able to walk away with something tangible from the workshop, not like give you some good food for thought. And if you have time on your own, pull something together. I really want you to be able to pull something together in this workshop. And so he's giving the outline you're going to need to think for your business through the outline, but we're going to give some space to be able to do that during the workshop so that you can walk away ready with some of the key pieces to get started. So thank you for being willing to share the outline, like to actually give them that. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, of course. And just to be clear, the outline will go from the job posting to making the offer all the way to how my team onboards new hires and
cool.
Our initial performance reviews, that kind of stuff. So
that's cool. Also, though, at the top of your outline was 2 sections you didn't just mention when you were listing out, which I thought was awesome. It was basically like resources for your team.
Yeah.
Before you list out like, this is what we do, it's almost like, here are all the links you will ever need regarding this process in one spot.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm talking about? Am I saying this right?
Yeah. So there's like our links area and then our like big picture why we do it this way section at the
Yeah.
beginning, we actually have like an SOP template for all of our templates. And our lead VA, again, he crushed it this past quarter. He made sure that all of our processes were templated and formatted in this way.
Cool.
And so that's another thing is if you like this process, you can tweak it, make a copy, and we have a very similar looking version of this that is like our starting point for every process that we create.
So cool. All right. Well, thank you for your time. And for those of you wondering, Joey is in the October sprint. So
yeah,
I feel like that's a reason to go hang out with Joey. But yeah, thanks for your time. And thanks for being willing to do the bonus workshop. That's going to be hugely, it's going to help a lot of people start to make headway in this area. So thank you. I really appreciate your time and your generosity.
I'm happy to do it. Thanks again for having me.
Yeah. Hey, people who want to look more into you and what you're up to right now, where do you want them to head?
Oh man. Well, you can find me at either indylaw.com or joeycvitale.com. And then joey at indylaw.com is a great email if you want to connect one-to-one.
Okay, cool. All right. Well, thanks. Talk to you later. Hi guys, it's me again. Thank you so much for listening. If you like this podcast, you probably understand that growth requires results, not just staying active. If you want to learn how to build your days around getting results, I'll show you how in this zero fluff class that I teach. Go to velocitywork.com/results for registration information. I cannot wait to see you there. If you want to hang out with us on social, come on over to Instagram. Our handle is velocity.work. And on Facebook, it's facebook.com/meetvelocitywork. Cheers, my friends, to real growth and a great life. Show notes from this episode can be found at velocitywork.com/podcast.